Hello and welcome to the next lesson in our GCSE songwriting course. Today what I wanted to do is to expand on what we already know about using the circle of fifths in order to write a piece of music, but we want to start changing things up a little bit and adding some dissonance into the music that we're writing. What I mean by dissonance is it's almost the opposite of consonants. Consonant chords or consonant melodies would be something like that. Whereas something that had lots of dissonance might be more. It moves around all over the place. Now, everybody's got different taste as to how much dissonance they like in a piece of music. Personally, I think if you have it mostly consonant with a little bit of dissonance, tends to make a piece of music sound much more interesting without sounding too out there and a bit too dissonant. But everyone's got their own preference as to how much dissonance they like. It's a bit like adding spice to a meal. You either want it very bland or you want to add more and more spice. Something like that, which is a little bit too much. Everyone's got their own idea as to how much is too much. I think a happy medium is the way to go. Mostly consonant chords that fit nicely together and are sort of pleasing to the ear, with a little bit of dissonance thrown in. So before we go any further, I just want to explain how these chords work and how these changes between different chords and between different intervals work and why they sound consonant and why they sound dissonant. So there's a little bit of maths coming up, but it's worth it. It's worth explaining at this point. What I have here is the circle of fifths that we're used to. We've had a little play around with that. And then I've got something new up here, which the one relates to the other. Down in this column, we've got all the different notes, D, G, C, notes that we should all be familiar with. Here, we've got all the different intervals, that's the gaps between the notes. So unison, a perfect fifth, or a perfect fourth. We're used to those because we've been using those on our circle of fifths. Then here, these little ratios describe the difference between each of those notes. I'll just very quickly explain what's meant by those ratios, because this stuff is fundamentally what music is made of. Doesn't matter what musical culture or musical time period we're talking about. These ratios, these differences between notes, are what pretty much all music is made out of. That's all music that ever has been written, all music that ever will be written, is made from the relationships with these notes. So let's just very quickly explain what I mean by that. If I play, I'm going to do unison. Okay, that's a D. If I pick up my guitar and I play the same note on guitar, which is this one, they're vibrating in unison. This note and this note on the guitar are vibrating exactly the same. If I want to do an octave, that's a 1:2 ratio. This one's vibrating half as much as this one, or rather this one is vibrating twice as fast as this one, 1:2 ratio. Now then, let's look at some of the other ratios that we can use. So we've got the fifth, that's the one we've been using a lot, 3:2 ratio. Let's play a fifth. In this instance, it's D to A. That means that for every 2 vibrations that this note is doing, this one is doing 3 vibrations. So they're going out like that. The speakers themselves are going out like that, and then it's coming back, and then they're half, and then they come back together again. For every 2 vibrations, this one's doing 3 vibrations. If we go back the other way, perfect fourth. For every 3 vibrations this note is doing, this one is doing 4. And we can just keep expanding that as much as we like. Another way of looking at it is to see it physically on a guitar string. So if I pluck the string, it sounds like that. If I put my finger in a very specific spot, right in the middle here, these 2 halves are exactly the same length, 1:1 ratio. So here's 1:1, here's 1:2 ratio. You can hear it still makes a noise, and it's an octave. If I put my finger somewhere random, it doesn't do anything. If I put my finger here, that's the 2:3 ratio, the perfect fifth. We get a perfect fifth. There's the first. There's that same interval on the piano. E E to B. On a guitar, sounds like this. Okay, that relationship is something that's present in all musical cultures, and it's something that is a natural property of vibrating strings or vibrating objects. It's existed for as long as the universe has, technically. That's why these ratios that we use in music, they're present in every song that ever has been written, and as far as I can tell, every song that ever will be written. Also worth noting that we just said that this was the 2:3 ratio, the fifth. If we were to divide that up into 5, we've got 3 sections here to only 2 sections here. You can physically see it. If I do a fourth, that was 4:3, wasn't it? You can hear I get the same thing. Those different ratios are properties of vibrating objects, and humankind has used that property of vibrating objects to create music for tens and tens of thousands of years. And that's what we still exploit today to make music. Just by exploiting those ratios and those properties of a vibrating object, we can make all the music that we need. We'll find that the low numbers tend to be consonant, i.e. from a perfect fourth, that's D to G. They're right next to each other on the circle. A D chord to a G chord sounds nice and consonant. Again, if we use this low ratio, 3 to 2, or a perfect fourth, D to A, again, it sounds nice and consonant. They're consonant chords. They're not that exciting, but they're satisfying to play. You get these lovely cadences, and then it almost wills itself to go back there. Now, what we're going to be doing in this lesson is trying to use some of these higher ratios or some of these more dissonant intervals in order to write some more interesting music. Let me give you an example of one. If I go right the way across, let's start here, and we're going to do a minor sixth. Yeah, big jump. That's D to B flat, or ratio of 1 to a ratio of 128 to 81. Again, that would be for every, let me think about this, for every 81 vibrations this is doing, this one's doing 128. Already that sounds quite jarring, so let's see what that would sound like if they were chords. So D to B flat, if we look at them on here, D to B flat, it's a massive jump. We're not using chords that are right next to each other as we did before. We've got a big jump, D to B flat. Yeah, it's not completely dissonant, but it's it's a bit more interesting, isn't it? Try another one. We'll use D as a starting point again. D to, let's say, F sharp. D chord to an F sharp chord. Sounds a bit odd if we go right the way across, so let's go all the way down to this G sharp. D to G sharp would sound very dissonant. Again, you might want that in your song. You might want a little bit of dissonance in a piece of music. Something like that. My feeling is that everyone's got their own idea as to how much dissonance they want in a piece of music. Some people like almost no dissonance at all, so a lot of pop songs will just have no dissonance at all in that one. They were all notes that were all in this sort of area. Some people like lots and lots of dissonance in their pieces of music. It depends how much dissonance you like. Generally speaking, you want to find a nice happy medium. For the sort of music you're likely to be writing, it wants to be mostly consonant chords that fit well together, but with a little bit of dissonance thrown in just to make it interesting. So let's listen to a few chord sequences, or rather we'll create a few chord sequences that use this idea of adding dissonance to a piece of music as well as adding consonants to a piece of music. 1, 2. Let's use what we've just learned about those ratios and see if we can make something that sounds a little bit dissonant and maybe a little bit more interesting than what we've done before. So let's go with C to G to A minor, and then I'm going to go to B flat. Yeah, B flat's all the way over here. I've made quite a big jump, and for these purposes C and A minor are effectively the same chord. All I've done there is I've gone C to G, that's a fifth, that was that small ratio, and then to a B flat, so that's a big jump of a seventh, which is a much higher ratio. Again, that's a little bit more interesting. It starts off nice and consonant, and then goes somewhere interesting. And it could roll back round to C quite nicely. We could use B flat's relative minor at this point, maybe. So the minor G to the major version of C. Again, the original one was G major to C, but G minor to C. Again, we've done a big jump from one to the other. Makes it a slightly more colourful, slightly more interesting chord sequence. We could try another one. I'll always start with C. Let's go C, then go to F, then go to G. Again, not too much of a jump. It's all pretty standard. Then let's jump right the way across to D. Yeah, I've moved around the circle a little bit more liberally. Rather than staying in one place, I'm expanding where I'm moving to. Again, that one works quite well. It's C, F, G. We move from D to C, a slightly bigger jump. And you'll notice that each time I make these little chord sequences, moving from one place to another, so C to G flat, for example, there's a big jump. It sounds very, very different. Okay, you might want to use that for a key change or modulation. Let's try another. Let's go. Again, start on C, go to its relative, A minor, back to C again. So far, so consonant, and then that one. I went C to E, big jump, third of the way around the little wheel. Yeah, C to E, major third. A major third here is, there it is, 81 to 64. Big ratio jump, and that's why we get that dissonance. You wouldn't want to fill a song with that level of dissonance, but it does sound a little bit interesting. Made a mistake there. Instead of playing an E major, I accidentally put that note in. I really like that. I'm going to write that down and keep it. It was C, A minor, C to this funny E. Sounds like something that would be, I don't know, like a sci-fi type of thing. So again, that little mistake, I'm going to write that down. It was actually an E with a sharpened fifth and augmented E. Don't worry about that too much, but that really could go somewhere interesting. You could go to A, which is next door to E. Too much dissonance can be a little bit dissonant. It just doesn't work so well. But a little bit here and there really makes a composition stand out. Again, I particularly like that. I could develop that idea. In fact, I think I will develop that idea in my DAW and see what it sounds like. What I want you to do is to try and do the same thing. Pick a few chords that are next to each other and then stick one random chord that's dissonant. Make a little 4-chord sequence, or if you want to go a little bit further, you could make an 8-chord sequence, but just try keeping consonant chords and then adding a little dissonant chord in there. See what sort of thing you come up with. You might write 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 different songs that way until you really get a feel for what works and what doesn't. Try it yourself.